live discussion about recent trends with the EB-2 NIW, and what we will also be discussing and reflecting upon is successful strategies for overcoming the recent trends or response to the recent trends, how we typically suggest, a potential EB-2 NIW applicant would approach to have more success in the changing landscape. So in order to kind of get this conversation started, we're providing a couple of statistical bits of data for you. Trends for the fiscal year Q1. The approval rate dropped pretty significantly, stayed around 62.7%. That means the denial rate was 37.3%. What we learned in Q1 was that sharp scrutiny is continued and reflects that January 2025 policy update. And so what we saw, we were noting volatility in decisions because of the USCIS really flexed its discretion in Q1. And so some things that we thought would previously have been approved, we were being shocked by the fact that some of those things were not being approved in Q1.
And the same thing going on from Q2. It's really similar. The numbers haven't changed that much. And also important to note that there still is applications pending that aren't included in these numbers. But the approval rate is still lower compared to, even a year or 2 years ago, the approval rates are much higher. So unfortunately, they have lowered in the last 2 quarters, especially. And like Chelsea said, like USCIS is flexing its power. And at first we were thinking that it was they were applying with the EB-1A standards, and we see that kind of language in RFE sometimes. I've seen other attorneys theorize that perhaps there's been something internally with USCIS that they've changed, perhaps a new policy that has been made public. We can't say for sure that that's the case. It just seems that they have heightened the scrutiny without perhaps updating their policies to show that beyond the January 15th memo.
Okay, and that takes us to denial trends. We wanted to talk to you today about maybe some of the trends that we're seeing amongst the 3 prongs. So of course, in addition to these 3 prongs is the educational requirement, but some of the standout denial trends are in the first prong, where we're seeing RFEs and or denials really wanting that petitioner to show that their job title or their role with an employer will kind of stand out for a particular field, or that the client themselves has distinguished themselves. They're really wanting this concept of broader impact kind of articulated in more measurable ways than just saying the ripple effect, which we were able to successfully leverage, in a couple of years ago. So what you're seeing with that first prong is this heightened requirement for like a broader impact discussion. How is this person reaching beyond themselves, beyond their employer? What are they really doing for the broader field or the United States broadly? The second prong is sort of a continuation of this, because they're wanting the petitioner to really distinguish themselves. They're wanting to show how their projects have already had some kind of measurable impact. They're really wanting the things that the petitioner has accomplished to stand out in some way from being just a general company initiative or standing out from being some kind of just general trend in the industry. They're wanting you to be maybe a couple steps ahead. They're really wanting you to show how what you've already done sets you up as a springboard to then achieve something that's beyond industry norm, beyond the traditional growth of the industry. And so that leaves us with the third prong, is that normally most cases have failed either the first or the second prong. That doesn't mean that the third prong can't stand alone, though. We have seen the third prong fall by itself. And the reason is because they're really looking for this discussion that the skills are not easily articulated on that typical perm application. They're really wanting you to show that there's urgency. They're really wanting you to show that in consideration of all of the things that you have to weigh, that there is a national interest in waiving that job offer requirement for the traditional perm. So while the third prong is much less complicated, it's much more straightforward in terms of identifying what the urgency could be, identifying what the skills may be in your portfolio that make you kind of at that exceptional ability threshold. It can, in theory, stand by itself, but often we see this one falling in conjunction with either prong 1 or prong 2.
Exactly. And I feel so frustrated sometimes if there is an RFP issued on prong three, but there isn't any analysis because I'm like, this is what I feel like EB-2 NIW is all about. Like, why can't their skills fit into the labor certification process? So sometimes I get frustrated when I see these denials for cases that I'm like, it's so clearly it is laid out.
I agree.
And then keeping up with other, pitfalls that we've seen in applications that were ultimately denied. We'll see USCIS
Hmm.
attack on broad or vague proposed endeavors. If people aren't laying out like a clear pathway and what goals they want to achieve. Again, the narrow impact, we've seen USCIS, as Chelsea said, crack down on this, especially like we noted previously for people who are already employed. It seems that if the USCIS officer doesn't really have the time, they're just going to look at how this person is already employed and just generalize all of their work into that kind of category and whatever that job title is without looking into really what it is the person plans to do, which is very
Yeah.
frustrating. We've also seen petitions that have failed generally if they try to rely on the field at large rather than their work, what it is their niche, what it is they specifically want to do. USS has said before, like just showing that there is jobs open in the field is not enough to show that you are the person that can fill these jobs or that your skills are urgently needed. Um, and again, we've also seen clients come in just wanting to copy somebody else's proposed endeavor. Maybe they found on Reddit or found somewhere else openly accessible
Yeah.
without really like tailoring it to what is their skill set, what it is they want to do. Like you won't be successful just copying another proposed endeavor that you perhaps found online.
Very true, Kate. That's great advice. So, what does make for strong evidence strategies in a successful NIW petition, right? We're telling you all the things that are going wrong. We're telling you all of the pitfalls. We're telling you all of the negative things. But what does that mean for your petition? What if you want to be an NIW petitioner and have a successful, experience, then what does that look like for you? Well, in like simplified terms, let's think stronger evidence, right? We really want to highlight your exceptional ability. That doesn't mean the field's exceptional ability. That means your specific contributions, what makes you unique, what makes you different, what makes you very difficult or irreplaceable within your field, right? So, stronger evidence could look like in your proposed endeavor, we want better methodologies, better explanation of the advanced skill set that you will be relying on. Even better if you have a multifocal skill set. So, say that you have a bachelor's degree in kind of electrical engineering. Well, electrical engineering we know sets you up for many, many different master's degrees. You could go on and do some other form of engineering. You could go on and do something with IT. You could really set yourself up to do a number of different future endeavors. So, what we want to do is we really want to bring together that multifocal skill set, that elite skill set that is something above and beyond what is ordinary within your field. Um, we also want to be able to provide some kind of measurable impact of your past impact. Do you have any kind of statistical evidence to show that your past projects have been undeniably successful in your field, that they've contributed to something larger than yourself? Of course, alignment with national priorities is also going to be huge. But how do we do that? What does that look like? Were any of your projects funded by grants? That's a great way, to show that it's aligned to US national priorities. If the US funded the project in some way, then, that's great for you. If you work at a nonprofit that is part of a US organization, I think that's also a great choice. State funded projects are also a great kind of segue to get some of that introduction. If you're working more in the corporate round, well, then you need to kind of have stronger evidence because we're going to have to lean on something other, beyond the company's success in order to show that there's some kind of alignment to national priorities. Something that we often see for folks who, for instance, are in kind of like the aerospace engineering, they may work at a private organization, but they're typically working on federally funded projects. So we can still get there, right? Same with some of the engineers working in waterways. A lot of times they could be working for privately funded groups, but they're working on federally funded projects. So I don't mean to discourage anyone working for someone in a private organization. I'm just saying that you have to be able to show alignment to US national priorities, more so than just showing that there's something that's been enacted in 2025 that aligns to your industry broadly. So another option would be those letters of recommendation demonstrating that there's been collaborations, also contract agreements. We've seen some great pieces of evidence come from clients whose work is being utilized on a contractual basis. Basically, whether they don't necessarily have to have a patent, but of course, if you do, that's excellent excellent evidence as well. Anything that we can show that there's engagement collaborations, that could be in letters of recommendation, collaboration letters, it could be in awards, media, different things like that. Also, if you have an entrepreneurial style endeavor, and now these continue to be a topic of their own, so I'm not getting into that here today. But if you do have entrepreneurial endeavors, I do caution you. Typically, we don't recommend that because it takes away from the focus of your exceptional ability in whatever industry you have. But say you are somebody coming to the US with a profound entrepreneurial background, then that could potentially become part of your petition. In that case, we would definitely have to see evidence such as business plans, funding proof, interest proof, different things like that also show that you have exceptional entrepreneurial skills in addition to whatever other field you may be a part of. I think that changed. Did it change, Kate, the slide?
I think it's just on a delay. Here we go. Yeah. In the same kind of realm, what more can you do to really strengthen your application? Tailoring your endeavor to your expertise introductory is just so vital.
Yes.
I just caution people against looking up what they think is like a hot topic, what they think is in the interest of the White House, and trying to like merge that into your own goals when it doesn't really align. It won't be successful. Like, it's important that this endeavor is true to you and your goals and what you want to do. Like Chelsea said, providing that concrete evidence of past and future impact is also crucial. This can come in the forms of letters of recommendation, previous emails, funding letters, as we said. Again, using concise, clear, and nationally relevant language. Again, all of our clients are from all over the world and in many different fields, and all those fields have different technical language. So we want to make sure that the reviewing officer can read this and understand what it is without having to be an expert in this field. Like, they don't have that long to review the application, so we don't want to bog them down with too many technical terms. And unfortunately, we do need to anticipate this heightened scrutiny. I feel like some clients may be frustrated by having to go further into detail or provide further evidence, but I just think in this current landscape, it's not enough to rely on the EB-2 NIW standard as is codified, because in practice, that's not what's being implemented. It is a higher standard, so it's better just to draft the petition in that way rather than doing the EB-2 typical, what we could have done maybe a year or two ago, and getting an RFE. Unfortunately, RFEs may still be inevitable. It is discretionary. Looking at the approved cases versus denied cases, I can see approved ones that I initially thought were weaker that were ultimately approved, and denied ones that were, stronger. And so it's still discretionary. It's still hard to make sense of. But putting as much evidence forward as possible is, I think, a stronger approach. And ultimately, if you're eligible for the EB-1A, I think it's a good idea also to go down that route if possible.
Right. Yeah, so that's a great segue, Kate. Bringing up the EB-1A, that could make clients confused. It can make clients a little bit worried about, like, well, what should I do? What is best for me?
Right.
I do think that we can kind of summarize the EB-1A trend pretty quickly in saying that, yes, we do see higher approval rates technically, but I think the scrutiny is just as high for EB-1A. They're being required to provide higher levels of national impact than before as well.
Mm-hmm.
So while we do see EB-1A like language in the NIW denials or RFEs, I think that it's important to help folks realize that there is still a distinct classification for EB-1A. It's also a little bit higher evidence that's required there as well for national impact. So with that in mind, so we can say that, this meeting, or this presentation today, we can summarize by saying that, the 2025 denial rates, they really increased. The denials increased from 2024, but what we're seeing is a modest improvement. We're seeing things kind of playing out. We're thinking that at this time, we feel more confident in understanding what the USCIS is looking for. We do think that they've been a little less than transparent they provided this policy update, but they're still not providing a lot of insight as to how it's actually being reviewed. Notably, we are sharing with you that we've noticed some inconsistencies, right? Cases that we thought for sure should get approved, we're having to fight a lot harder for those. And ultimately, sometimes that's still not enough. We don't mean to be negative, but what we do try to do is share this so that we can improve common pitfalls, those vague endeavors, those reliance upon the field's impact rather than your own impact. Those things don't work anymore. Strengthen petitions in a way that gives you what we call SMART goals. So there are those things that are achievable, they're calculated. We're trying to improve evidence so that we can avoid that, letdown of an RFE or denial. We know that RFEs can still be part of someone's successful journey. So for clients in the past who were used to saying, oh, well, premium processing approved, I won't get an RFE. Well, that's an outdated kind of approach to an NIW. And that was something that we see commonly with our clients or prospective clients is that, hey, my roommate did this 2 years ago and they just submitted with premium processing and it was approved. And, why are you requiring so much more from me? And the answer is times have changed and we have to change with them if we want to be successful. I'll end by saying that for the folks who are in the healthcare, who are in those traditional STEM realms, we do see that there's still a preference, probably just as there always was, right, for those kinds of fields. But the other thing to say is that even those fields are getting pushback in that publications alone are not enough. Previously, it used to be kind of like, clients would come to us with a misconception that you had to have publications in order to have success just because of some of the statistics that were associated with approvals at that time. We do see more pushback now from research folks as well. So I do think that while there is probably still a slight preference, I still think that those clients are having to work very, very hard for their petitions as well. So we still see a path forward. Our firm, if you want to go on our website, we offer evaluations. We do help our prospective clients and clients align their skill set to the NIW framework and provide, honest feedback on strengths and weaknesses. And that could be a great tool for you if you're thinking about getting started with an NIW. We also, we do also offer consultations. That's something that we try to support our community with. But also, these informationals each week, I think that they're a really great nugget of information, kind of live feedback that our team is able to provide to the community to help provide better insight and educational awareness to their immigration journey.